Welcome to Almost Here, Round the Corner Future Technology podcasts with Richard Jacobs. Future technologies poised to transform our lives for better or worse are the focus of this podcast. Almost here means these technologies are now here and starting to be used, or just around the corner, from Bitcoin to artificial intelligence, 3D printing, blockchain, virtual reality, and more.
Hello, this is Richard Jacobs with the Future Tech Podcast. My guest is Victoria Field. She's a nutrition expert and a co-founder of the Metabolic Health Summit, which is coming up January 2019. And we're going to talk to Victoria about her work in the keto world and then a little bit about the summit. So, Vicki, how you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah. So, I find everyone in this field has a very interesting backstory. So what got you into thinking about metabolic health and the ketogenic diet and all that? What's your history?
Yeah, that's a good question. For me, I have a fitness background. It sort of starts there. I competed professionally in the fitness world for many years, coached athletes, and then just everyday people just wanting to improve their health. And it really continued to evolve for me, though, as I discovered the ketogenic diet actually in a format that impacted my dog to start. So one of the founders of Quest Nutrition has quite the passion for, answering questions that have yet to be answered, and also really figuring out sort of where nutrition lies in that conversation, because it's really sort of an underutilized tool in medicine and science. And so quite a few years ago, Keto Pet Sanctuary was started. And at the time, my dog had suffered grand mal seizures due to a brain injury. And as the Keto Pet protocol was being established there, we decided, let's put our dog on a ketogenic diet. It's been used as a metabolic therapy for over 100 years when it comes to epilepsy. So maybe it might work for a canine, and it did. And we were able to get my dog off of anticonvulsants, which completely had changed her up until the point that we shifted her nutrition, and we controlled her seizures entirely through nutritional means. And that sort of inspired me to take it was a pretty incredible transformation, and sort of inspired my husband and I to then take a deeper dive into the ketogenic diet and its application, not just with epilepsy, but with a variety of other diseases and also human performance. So that sort of was the start of me getting involved in Epigenix Foundation and Keto Pet, and the rest is history, and I've not looked back.
It's funny for pets. Dogs are happy. I think they would be super happy to be eating keto. They wouldn't mind at all. Tons of fats and meat, and they'd have zero problems with it.
Right. Well, you sort of think about how dogs evolved, right? And what's currently on store shelves is sort of, majority of it is carbohydrates. If you look at sort of that form factor that is kibble, and then you think about what's comprised of a ketogenic diet, you've got great sources of meat, you've got healthy sources of fat, you've got leafy green vegetables. It's no surprise dogs kind of gravitate towards that, and it in turn is also far more species appropriate. And so it's really transformed our dog's life. And then through Keto Pet, it's transformed thousands of other dogs' lives throughout the program, what we sort of learned at the sanctuary, and then have now started to share with the rest of the world.
Have you noticed that keto has the same effect in people as in dogs? It's able to reverse certain health conditions, and what do you see that happens to the dogs once the diet's changed? Do they get more vivacious, or what do they do?
Yeah, so to kind of take it back to where Keto Pet sort of started, and what we wanted to do was just explore, validating the diet in canines, which really hadn't been done before. So Keto Pet was started several years ago, back in 2014. But prior to that, Dr. Dominic D'Agostino and Dr. Peter Attia actually sat down with the founder of Quest that I just mentioned, Ron Penna, and shared their knowledge on fat metabolism and what they've seen so far, and its application in disease and human performance. And really the next question was, how do we start to validate the diet right away and take a look at it specifically when it comes to cancer? And that's where Keto Pet was really born. And what the whole goal was to, one, let's save dogs. Let's help give dogs a better quality of life. So we'd rescue dogs with naturally occurring forms of cancer from shelters who were otherwise going to be euthanized, and had a cancer diagnosis. And actually there was PET CT imaging on site, as well as hyperbaric oxygen chamber treatments. And it was really a beautiful 53-acre facility where we could, help validate the diet, see what happens when we provide it to a canine, as well as hopefully reversing disease in these dogs. And what we found is 55% success rate in extending lives far beyond prognosis. So, we had our first graduate was Callie, and she was actually diagnosed with hemangiosarcoma when she first came to us. What we thought was a litter of puppies was actually one puppy, and the rest was tumor. And she had it's the deadliest form of cancer that canines can really get. And she was actually given about 6 weeks to live when she was 4.5 years old, and she had surgery to remove the tumor. We took her to Keto Pet, PET scanned her to see sort of at that point, was it metastatic? And it was. And so we put her on a ketogenic diet, and we've got about a 120-day protocol. And at the end of the 120 days, she was PET negative, and she's now 9 years old, and she was only given, like I said, 6 weeks to live, which is pretty incredible. So so we've seen some pretty profound effects, and since then we've learned so much, and sort of the whole mission behind Keto Pet is now to educate the public on appropriate dog nutrition. And so there's a keto calculator on the Keto Pet website, that will help you formulate a diet for your dog at home that, even if your dog doesn't suffer from cancer or say epilepsy, and you just want to improve your dog's overall lifespan and quality of life, you can do so through ketosis. So it's a pretty powerful tool is what we found.
No, that's great. I mean, it makes total sense. Now with people, what's your work been like with them? And, what have you noticed? What's the people story now?
Yeah. So in learning what we did at Keto Pet, we said, how do we start helping people right away in this nutrition approach? It's showing so much promise. And so Epigenix Foundation was founded, and Keto Pet's a program under Epigenix Foundation. And Epigenix was really founded to understand the epigenetic impact of those metabolic interventions, much like the ketogenic diet, on human disease and performance, and really see what we can sort of do when it comes to focusing on our daily choices that we make, because they can have a pretty incredible effect. And it's often, not as studied as it maybe should be. And that's continuing to grow. There's more and more researchers, scientists that are really taking a look at metabolic therapies, which is really exciting. So we decided, the way we could kind of get started was to partner with a variety of oncologists who were open to exploring the ketogenic diet and its application in potentially being an adjunct to standard of care. And so we partnered with a neuro-oncologist at Cedars-Sinai who was open to exploring the ketogenic diet in combination with standard of care, and refer patients to us who were dealing with late-stage brain cancer that wanted to try a ketogenic diet. And so we worked with a group of late-stage brain cancer patients. That was one of our groups, or one of our pilot studies. We also
that's one of the toughest populations to work with, I'm sure. What happened with them in general before we move on?
Yeah, so that was probably one of the most impactful experiences for me personally, but also for the patient. So one patient in particular actually came to the oncologist that we worked with. His name is David Shevok, and he said, I've done paleo, but I'm looking and finding online that there's a lot of promise, specifically with glioblastoma and the ketogenic diet, at least in maybe preclinical trials and whatnot. So because of him, the doctor sort of was open to giving it a try, and we worked with about 15 patients. And, some of them were currently going through standard of care. Some had, tried chemo, radiation, a variety of other forms of treatment, and nothing had really shown to work. And we saw some really incredible effects. Above all else, first and foremost, was quality of life for some of these patients significantly improved. So, for instance, Dave, actually, he was suffering from aphasia, alexia, and had lost his ability to read and write and communicate in some ways. And so he, within about 4 weeks, gave me a call and said, I can't believe it. I just read a paragraph in a book, and I've not been able to read for months. This is huge.
It's great.
And so that's just one example. We also worked with a professional surfer who unfortunately had lost his ability to surf. He started to suffer from seizures and wasn't able to get in the water. And so we started working with him, and I actually got to see him compete again in a professional surf competition a few months after he had started as well. And he actually saw about a 50% reduction in tumors, in his tumor. But one of the, I think, most incredible effects of being able to provide metabolic therapy, or at least use it in combination with what other treatments they were going through, was it empowered the patients that we were working with. So maybe when they didn't feel like they had many options, or, they were going through chemo, radiation, and really felt maybe helpless in the situation, it provided them with something that they could do that, even if it didn't work, it started to make them feel better. It started to, provide them with something that they knew each day I can work towards something. And that was really empowering, which, as you know, when you feel empowered, your mind shift changes, and that positive energy can also make a pretty significant impact on whatever you might be dealing with at the current time. So it was a really incredible pilot study, and actually has gone on to inspire the medical institution to start a clinical trial involving the ketogenic diet in combination with standard of care, which is really the first step to make this a part of the conversation. Potentially immediately upon diagnosis, a glioblastoma patient, in my hopes and dreams, will be able to, have the choice of, you can try chemo, you can try radiation, maybe chemo, radiation combined, and then also you have a nutritional intervention that might also improve the efficacy of those treatments that you can try as well. So it was a pretty incredible experience.
Yeah, I can see why, because when you're sick with cancer, everything's being done to you, and you're dependent upon the doctors to fix you. But this is something you can do and heal yourself with. So I can see why it's so powerful and so impactful.
Yeah, it really provides patients with a different, I think, perspective, those who want to try something themselves. And it does make a pretty significant impact, even if maybe some of the patients that we worked with unfortunately didn't survive. It at least provided like an improvement in their life up until that point, at the very least. And in some cases, those who we worked with are continuing to thrive today, because nutrition is certainly a powerful tool. So it's an exciting time, really.
Well, speaking of tools, I spoke to a lot of people in the keto world. So some of the tools I've heard about and experienced are, the ketogenic diet, intermittent fasting, exogenous ketones, and you mentioned the hyperbaric oxygen. So I wanted to ask you your opinion of these things and your observation. If you can step through them, do you feel like these are helpful adjuncts to the ketogenic diet, and how do they help and why?
Yeah, I think what we've really learned through the process at Epigenix Foundation, and just in my own sort of just diving in deep to some of the research that's happening, is the ketogenic diet is certainly a powerful tool, but it's even more so powerful when you use it as sort of in combination with a variety of other tools, right? So hyperbaric oxygen chamber treatments, as well as intermittent fasting, to even certain supplements that are out there on the market can be helpful, especially when you're dealing with something like cancer. I think you really have to apply just about all of it in sort of like a very dynamic approach. And it's just not, one thing is sort of a cure-all by any means. And, we found that when you can combine some of these practices, especially alongside the current standard of care, it can be a pretty powerful combination and hopefully impact disease in a way that is positive. So I really do think you need to implement, most of those therapies. Every case is a little bit different. Intermittent fasting, I do think, is a very powerful tool in combination with the ketogenic diet. It can be a little trickier when you're obviously dealing with a cancer diagnosis. Dogs are a little bit different than humans, so it's much more controlled. Obviously, the dogs at the sanctuary were watched over by us. And then when we started to work with dogs outside of the sanctuary, it's a little bit harder to control for, from everything from what is the body condition score of the dog. The owner's perspective is going to be probably far different than what ours is when it comes to what's healthy, what's too lean, what's overweight. So intermittent fasting might be a little bit more challenging to implement. Hyperbaric oxygen chamber treatments are also something that, not everybody might have access to, especially when it comes to animals. It's typically used in sort of an emergency setting, but in cancer, it's still something that's emerging. And then with humans, same thing. I mean, if we can really use it as the tool that it is, and at least have it sort of the diet as sort of that underlying foundation, and then you add in additional tools on top of that, whether it be standard of care, HBOT treatments, intermittent fasting from time to time, maybe even exogenous ketones if it's appropriate for that person, depending on what they're dealing with. I think you have to take a multi sort of dimensional approach, and it can't just be sort of the diet and that's it, at least when it comes to, focusing on something like cancer.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. You got to bring all the tools to bear that you can. So, yeah, totally. So
Absolutely.
I want to talk about the Metabolic Health Summit shortly, but where are you at today with your work with the pets and with the humans? What's happening right now and what is coming in the next 6 months to a year?
Yeah, so Epigenix Foundation, we went through 3 different pilot studies. As I had mentioned, the late-stage brain cancer pilot study that we conducted alongside a medical institution out here in Los Angeles, and we did a early-stage breast cancer study with a breast oncologist in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. That was pretty incredible. Actually, we were working with about a group of 15 to 20 women who had not yet received a clinical diagnosis, but rather had a blood test that showed early stage breast cancer. And so we put them on a ketogenic diet, and really the focus was cancer. But at the end of that 120-day study, the ladies lost about 300 pounds combined and transformed their lives, their husbands' lives, and it really impacted more than just the group of women that we were working with. And then we sort of had an open registry of patients with a variety of different types of cancers, stages, ages, that we worked with as well, that sort of had heard about Epigenix Foundation maybe through their physician or other means. And then once those ended, really a big focus for us is Keto Pet Sanctuary and educating people about proper nutrition. We're sort of on a hiatus when it comes to human studies, which may pick back up in the future. But with Keto Pet, there was such a profound effect that the diet had on these dogs that were dealing with a cancer diagnosis. I mean, so much so that Callie, our first graduate, is still with us today, that we said, you know what, we really have to educate people on proper nutrition for canines, because the majority of what is out there in the world is very high in carbohydrate and sugar and is not, species appropriate. You also have to think about how it's sort of processed. And so a big mission for Keto Pet is now educating the public and providing tools to help people implement a ketogenic diet with canines at home. So as I mentioned, the Keto Pep Calculator is available on the website, which will actually help you break down a ketogenic diet for whether your dog, just wants to live a healthier life. Maybe your dog has cancer or even epilepsy. You might use a different ratio of a ketogenic diet depending on the ultimate goal and what your dog's body condition score is, and how active they are, and all of those factors. And then it sort of helps you piece it together. So there's an option where there's 2 options through that calculator where you can actually use grocery store items that you would go and get for yourself at the local store, and you'd weigh out, and it tells you exactly like the specific amounts for each ingredient. And then there's a pre-made ketogenic dog food that are our partners at Keto Pet, named Valiant Pet Nutrition, where it just makes it a convenient option. And they actually started donating their dog food to our dogs at the sanctuary before they commercialized. So it's something we've actually used with our dogs at Keto Pet. So it gives people 2 different options if they want to explore it on their own or by themselves, or if they would prefer a convenient option, it's there. And then there's an ebook that's available on the website as well that really walks people through understanding canine ketosis. So a big part of the mission now is on education, because as you know, keto is a big buzzword. So it's important that there's accurate information that, this is not just a weight loss fad. It's not a fad by any means. It's been around for years and years, and it can be a powerful tool in a variety of applications.
Do you find that people will get into keto first and then they'll do it for their pet, or that, if their pet is sick, they'll help their pet go keto and then it makes them go keto? Like, is there a back and forth to this?
That is a great question. And it happens like both sides of the spectrum. So on the one hand, somebody like myself, I saw all the great benefits that my dog was experiencing. She was like a brand new dog. I said, well, if it helps her this much, it's got to help me. You know, I've suffered injuries along the way as an athlete, and sure enough, it did. It really is what transformed and inspired me to get started with the ketogenic diet. Whereas I've worked with people who, you know, they've started a ketogenic diet, maybe they've transformed their whole life, and then they say, wait a minute, what am I feeding my dog? You know, there's kibble, this dry food that, you know, processed a certain way. Why am I not giving my dog fresh food? And if you think about it, it's almost like if you were to give a child, you know, maybe cereal, the same brand for the rest of their lives. There are a lot of similarities there. You really have to think about, you know, could you imagine eating out of a packaged container, the same food every single day? I mean, it's really not how our dogs sort of evolved and really should live. So in that, you know, you see people really just change their own lives, and then they say, oh, this is crazy. I should be feeding my dog the same way, because it's almost more species appropriate for a canine to eat that way if you think about it. So it's been both sides of the spectrum, and we have some pretty incredible transformation photos on both fronts, both in, you know, humans and canines, and in, you know, canines and humans combined when they go on the journey together, which is a pretty cool thing to watch.
Well, now that I think about that, that might be, you know, I don't run a keto clinic. I wish I did, actually, but I think that would be cool if you do it with your pet. It would probably help compliance, I bet, and it would help everyone in the household. And the reason I
Totally.
said that, you know, I said this to a bunch of people. You know, one thing I noticed from improving my eating is that the better I feel, the better I am to, you know, my kids and my wife, and the better relationships I have, because I'm not feeling like, ugh, and I'm not, you know, lashing out at people. So
Right.
I think that's what people don't talk enough about, is that if you feel better by eating better, you'll, again, have better relationships and be a better person, you know?
It's
so I think
totally
that
true.
and the combination of doing it with your pet would be a huge help to people.
I agree 100%. It is really helpful. I mean, you know, if you have your significant other who tries the diet with you, obviously you're going to be way more successful than if, you know, you're eating your ketogenic food and the hubby or your wife is eating a big piece of cake after dinner. You know, it's going to make it a lot more challenging. And two, you know, dogs are our best friends, right? So if you can kind of go through that and see the changes in your dog, think about what it might do for you. So I 100% agree on the accountability front and the inspiration front. It can be pretty fun to go through that with somebody else who means a lot, or another furry friend who means a lot, you know, along the way.
Okay.
Oh, there you are.
Yeah. Let's talk about the Metabolic Health Summit. It's a conference that you said you co-founded. So let's tell listeners, because I definitely want to attend, and I hope their listeners will too. So I wanted to hear more about it from you.
Yeah, so it was founded, back in 2015. So really the goal was to create a scientific conference where we could bring all of the top researchers, clinicians, dietitians together that were conducting this research on metabolic therapy in one place, where not only would they not feel like they were in a silo working on this, but it could really foster collaborations. So the first couple of years were really sort of a heavy emphasis on obviously science and medicine, and that's sort of how it was founded, was to revolutionize the way we look at food and to really bridge the educational gap between the science and the real world. And that's especially true in this upcoming year. January 31st through February 3rd is when we're holding it. It's actually going to be out here in Long Beach, California, in Los Angeles. And the goal this year is to really, like I mentioned, bridge the education gap, because there's all this incredible work that's being done by, you know, top scientists, top physicians that really needs to, one, be presented and discussed. And, you know, we need to open people's eyes to what's actually happening around the world when it comes to the ketogenic diet and metabolic therapies. But what does that mean, you know, in the everyday person's kitchen? So in addition to bringing in the world's most respected scientists and doctors and dietitians to cover their work on the topic and really talk about what they've been doing sort of in the trenches in the lab to further metabolic therapies forward, we're also bringing out some top influencers to really showcase their personal stories, whether, you know, they've used the ketogenic diet for autoimmune issues, or maybe, you know, type 1 diabetes, they're actually going to talk about their personal experience, and then some of them will also be hosting cooking demonstrations. So it's 4 days of really a ketogenic experience where you get the science side of things. You get this, scientific poster session that showcases work from around the world, to, intensive presentations where you really get to learn down to the, detailed science and heart and soul of what's happening, to further metabolic therapies, to, nightly keto-friendly receptions with appetizers and wine that's low carb. And really, it provides you with an experience for the weekend. We also have a VIP mixer with all of our speakers that we're selling tickets to, where you actually get to engage and meet with people and hopefully foster collaborations and partnerships. And it's an incredible place to network, to even a gala dinner where we're going to be benefiting 2 nonprofits in the space, because one of our biggest passions is really moving this conversation forward in a way that's accurate and authentic. And also, we give back to the people who are doing good work. So the Charlie Foundation and Max Love Project, which are 2 organizations that are so important to the community because of the education they provide, when it comes to children dealing with both epilepsy and cancer. And 50% of ticket sales are going to go back, of California residents are going to go back to those 2 organizations. And we've got some amazing entertainment throughout the weekend as well that we'll be announcing here soon. So it'll be a lot of fun.
That's really great.
Yeah.
So you mean I won't be able to, I won't see people eating danishes and fruit and energy drinks all throughout the conference?
Unfortunately not. It was important to us to give people an experience that was down to the food they're eating, on at a nightly reception to, you name it. It's really important for us to provide that experience to really show how, first of all, delicious the ketogenic diet can be, and really how to apply it in the real world. So we're actually showcasing, we have an expo in addition to the 4 days of presentations where people can, see some of the latest innovative brands, because one of the beautiful things about keto becoming more mainstream is that there's a lot of companies that are actually putting together high quality products that make it a little bit easier to follow the diet, whether that's a food product or even a web application that might make it easier to track your ketone and blood glucose levels. We're going to be bringing them all together in one place. So we hope you'll make it.
Yeah, no, that's great. One last question about that. So it's not just for scientists. If you're a layperson and you want to get more involved in the keto world, in the metabolic health world, is it okay for you, or who's like the ideal person to attend the conference?
Absolutely. So it's open to the public. So from the person who just wants to learn about the ketogenic diet, maybe they've not started it, to maybe even a patient who wants to understand how it might be, used in a metabolic therapy capacity and disease management, to the physician who wants to maybe implement it in a clinical trial. We're going to have a variety of, in addition to the presentation, special interest forums that will really help people in sort of tying everything in. So we're going to have a physician who's going to speak to how to implement metabolic therapy, specifically the ketogenic diet, and get started with research, and to, how to start a keto diet plan with your dog at home. So it's for everybody. We do also anticipate being able to offer CMEs. So if you're a physician, continuing medical education is something that will be an opportunity too. So it's really for everybody. To be able to further this movement is our goal, and give back at the same time is also our mission.
Yeah, that's great, because I'm sure some people may have reservations and think, they're just going to be putting, formulas for chemistry on the board, but you said it's accessible to the layperson, so that's really good.
Yep. If you want to dive deep, you can dive deep. And if you want to just go to a great cooking class, you can do that too. So we've got a little something for everybody.
Excellent. That's really great. How many people are you expecting attendance-wise?
Yeah, so we're expecting to sell out at 850. So we do have more limited space in our VIP mixer, which we're getting close to selling out for. And then the gala dinner, we've got room for about 400 there. So, it's going to be, there's a lot of different things going on throughout the weekend. So we do anticipate selling out. So if you haven't got tickets, head over to metabolichealthsummit.com and get them soon, because it's coming up here in January.
All right, that's great. And then, so metabolichealthsummit.com for that. And then for your work
Yep.
with the Keto Pet work and the Epigenics, what are some resources for people?
Yeah, so you can go to epigenixfoundation.org, where you can learn more about, what the organization does, and a little bit more about just the work we've done in the past and who we're sort of partnered with. Then you can also go to Keto Pet Sanctuary. The website there is ketopet.org. And you can take a look at, there's some incredible resources there and scientific articles. If you really want to take a deep dive into sort of the inspiration behind the organization, you can find it there. Dr. Dominic D'Agostino and Dr. Angela Poff, the two co-hosts of Metabolic Health Summit, their work in the lab at the University of South Florida really has served as a huge inspiration for why Keto Pet started to begin with. So we list a variety of those scientific articles there, in addition to finding, a calculator if you want to formulate your own dog's diet, to an ebook. It's all there on ketopet.org.
All right, that's great. Well, Victoria, thanks so much for coming on the podcast, and you gave a lot of resources and info, so I really appreciate you coming.
Thank you. I really appreciate you having me, and hopefully we'll see you at MHF 2019.
Definitely, yeah.
You have been listening to Almost Here, Around the Corner Future Technology podcast with Richard Jacobs. Subscribe to this podcast, post a review to discover more future technologies that are poised to transform our lives for better or worse, such as Bitcoin, artificial intelligence, 3D printing, blockchain, virtual reality, and more.